The 1980s were a time of neon colors, big hair, and a freedom that feels almost reckless by today's standards. Back then, life moved to a different rhythm. Kids roamed neighborhoods unsupervised, cigarettes were lit at dinner tables, and seatbelts were optional suggestions rather than legal requirements. What seemed perfectly normal then would raise eyebrows, spark debates, or even land someone in legal trouble. Now, this wasn't a lawless era. It was simply a decade before helicopter parenting, strict safety regulations, and heightened social awareness reshaped how Canadians lived, played, and raised their families. Let's take a nostalgic journey through 15 everyday behaviors from the 80s that have since been left behind. Cigarette smoke was as much a part of the 80s atmosphere as synthesizer music and shoulder pads. Restaurants had ashtrays on every table, offices featured dedicated smoking lounges, and airplane cabins allowed passengers to light up mid-flight in designated rows. The idea of a non-smoking section was laughable, usually just a few tables separated by a flimsy half wall or a handwritten sign, doing nothing to stop the haze from drifting across the room. Indoor spaces constantly smelled of tobacco, and yellow-stained ceilings in diners and bus stations were common sights. Kids grew up watching their parents smoke at the dinner table, ash tapping into ceramic trays shaped like leaves, or fish teens experimented behind the school gym or at bush parties, passing around stolen cigarettes like contraband treasures. Branded cigarette ads covered billboards, hockey arenas, and magazine pages featuring glamorous models and rugged cowboys. Matchbooks and lighters emblazoned with logos were handed out freely at bars and gas stations, tucked into jacket pockets and glove compartments. The cultural acceptance was so complete that non-smokers were the ones expected to adapt, stepping outside for fresh air or waving smoke away without complaint. Buckling up was more suggestion than rule in the 80s. Seatbelt laws were either brand new or non-existent across much of Canada, and child car seats were rare luxuries rather than legal necessities. Kids bounced around the back seat of wood-paneled station wagons, stretched out for naps across the rear bench, or knelt backward to wave at drivers behind them. Long family road trips meant sprawling across vinyl seats, fighting over window spots, and occasionally tumbling forward when Dad hit the brakes too hard. Teens piled into friends' cars after school or hockey practice, some perched on laps, others crammed into hatchbacks with the rear door propped open. Nobody thought twice about it. Cars were social spaces, not safety capsules. Station wagons with rear-facing rumble seats were the ultimate family status symbol, letting kids sit backward and watch the highway disappear behind them. The sense of freedom was intoxicating. The wind through open windows, the smell of vinyl and gasoline, the thrill of speed without the constriction of straps. Today's mandatory booster seats, airbag warnings, and click it or ticket campaigns would have seemed absurdly overprotective back then. Helmets were for professional cyclists and daredevils, not for everyday kids tearing through neighborhoods on their BMX bikes. The 80s were defined by the feeling of wind whipping through hair as children raced down hills, popped wheelies in parking lots, and built makeshift ramps out of plywood and cinder blocks. Scraped knees, dirty hands, and the occasional bloody elbow were badges of honor, proof of a day well spent. Teens cycled to school with Walkman headphones clamped over their ears, lost in the latest cassette mix, completely oblivious to traffic or the concept of head protection, banana seats in bright colors, high-rise handlebars wrapped in foam grips, and pegs for trick riding defined the era's bike culture. Neighborhood bike gangs formed naturally, groups of kids who spent entire summers exploring trails, jumping curbs, and racing each other until the streetlights came on. Parents waved them off in the morning and expected them back by dinner, trusting that common sense and luck would keep them safe. The idea of mandatory helmet laws would have felt like government overreach, an unnecessary intrusion into the joyful chaos of childhood freedom. While technically illegal, the social tolerance for one for the road was far higher in the 80s than it is today. Designated drivers were a rarity, and the concept hadn't yet been drilled into the public consciousness through aggressive campaigns and strict enforcement. Adults regularly left holiday gatherings, dinner parties, or pub nights after several drinks, trusting their own judgment that they were fine to drive. The walk to the car was accompanied by jokes, laughter, and reassurances that it was only a short distance home. teens heard casual references to beer runs and sometimes found themselves passengers in cars driven by older friends or siblings who had been drinking. It wasn't seen as reckless, it was just how things were done. Cartoony public service announcements began appearing on TV, featuring exaggerated scenarios and catchy slogans like, "Don't drink and drive." But the message took years to sink in. House parties sometimes featured the awkward keys in a bowl ritual, where hosts tried to prevent guests from driving drunk, but enforcement was inconsistent. The shift toward today's zero-tolerance attitude came gradually, fueled by tragic stories, stricter penalties, and a cultural reckoning about the real consequences of impaired driving. Sticking out your thumb on the side of the highway was a legitimate way to get from point A to point B in the 80s. Hitchhiking was practical, cheap, and surprisingly common, especially among young people trying to reach concerts, cottages, or distant cities. Travelers stood at highway on-ramps or rest stops, often holding hand-scrawled cardboard signs with their destinations written in marker. Drivers would slow down, size up the hitchhiker, and decide whether to offer a lift based on gut instinct and a quick once-over. For adventurous teens, it was a rite of passage, a way to test independence, meet interesting strangers, and collect stories about eccentric drivers, roadside diners, and unexpected detours. Worn denim jackets covered in band patches, backpacks stuffed with sleeping bags, and the thrill of the unknown defined the experience. Some rides were silent and awkward, others turned into hours-long conversations about life, music, and the open road. The cultural shift toward fear of strangers and true crime awareness has made hitchhiking almost extinct today. But back then, it represented trust, spontaneity, and a belief that most people were fundamentally decent. Spanking, strapping, and other forms of physical discipline were widely accepted tools in the 80s, parenting and education playbook. Leather straps hung visibly in principals' offices, a silent but powerful threat that kept students in line. Teachers could send misbehaving kids to the office, knowing consequences would be swift and physical. At home, parents invoked the classic warning, "Just wait until your father gets home," a phrase that carried the weight of impending punishment, often delivered with a belt or wooden spoon. Children learned quickly which behaviors crossed the line and which adults had the heaviest hand. TV sitcoms of the era portrayed light spankings as humorous discipline, laugh tracks encouraging audiences to see it as harmless and effective. The cultural norm was that a little physical correction built character, taught respect, and prevented worse behavior down the road. Today's emphasis on child psychology, positive reinforcement, and research showing the harm of corporal punishment marks a dramatic shift. What once seemed like responsible parenting now feels outdated, even abusive, a relic of a time when discipline was physical and apologies were rare. Environmental consciousness was barely a blip on the radar in the 80s. Throwing trash out car windows, tossing pop cans onto sidewalks, and leaving picnic garbage in parks were common behaviors that went largely unchallenged. Highways were lined with glinting aluminum cans, crumpled cigarette packs, and fast food wrappers fluttering in the breeze. Public spaces like beaches, forests, and playgrounds were often littered with debris, a byproduct of a throwaway culture that hadn't yet grasped the long-term consequences. Kids occasionally collected glass bottles to return for a few cents each, earning pocket money for candy or arcade games. But organized curbside recycling was virtually non-existent in most communities. Garbage went into one bin, and that was that. Public service announcements began appearing, featuring mascots like Woodsy Owl with his catchy slogan, "Give a hoot, don't pollute," and Captain Nova urging kids to think twice before tossing trash. These early campaigns planted seeds of eco-consciousness, but real change was slow. The shift toward recycling programs, anti-littering laws, and widespread environmental education didn't gain serious momentum until the 90s and beyond, leaving the 80s as a decade of carefree waste and missed opportunities. The 80s were the golden age of unsupervised freedom. Parents routinely sent kids outdoors in the morning with a simple instruction: be home when the streetlights come on. There were no cell phones, no GPS tracking, no constant check-ins, just trust that neighbors and older siblings would keep a loose eye out. Children biked between friends' houses, built forts in ravines, explored construction sites, and invented elaborate games that lasted for hours. They navigated their neighborhoods like tiny adventurers, learning boundaries through trial and error rather than parental oversight. Teens organized house parties when parents went away for the weekend, spreading the word through landline calls and word of mouth, with minimal interference or consequences unless things got truly out of hand. The ring of a cowbell from a back porch, the smell of a neighbor's barbecue firing up, or the distant shout of a parent's voice signaled it was time to head home. Kids developed independence, problem-solving skills, and a sense of self-reliance that today's structured, supervised childhoods rarely allow. The shift toward constant monitoring, scheduled playdates, and fear of every potential danger has transformed childhood into something far more controlled and, some would argue, far less adventurous. Playgrounds in the 80s were thrilling, hazardous, and utterly unregulated by today's safety standards. Towering metal slides baked under the summer sun, scalding the backs of kids' legs as they flew down at breakneck speed onto gravel or hard-packed dirt. Spinning carousels, known as merry-go-rounds, whirled fast enough to fling off anyone who didn't grip the metal bars tightly. Teeter-totters launched kids into the air when their partner jumped off without warning, sending them crashing down onto asphalt. Jungle gyms rose high above the ground with no soft landing zones, just bare earth or concrete waiting below. On scorching days, touching the metal equipment meant instant burns. Yet kids kept playing, adapting by wrapping t-shirts around the bars or waiting for shade. Teens used these structures as hangout spots, daring each other to jump from the highest point or balance on narrow beams. The clang of metal chains, the taste of iron from monkey bars gripped in sweaty hands, and the inevitable scrapes and bruises were all part of the experience. Modern padded surfaces, safety-tested equipment, and liability concerns have transformed playgrounds into cautious, controlled environments, a far cry from the wild, injury-prone zones of the 80s. Climbing into the back of a pickup truck was as natural as buckling into a car seat, except there were no buckles, no seats, and no one questioning whether it was safe. Summer road trips to the lake meant kids piling into the open bed, sprawling across old blankets or sitting on wheel wells, hair whipping wildly in the wind as the truck bounced down gravel roads. The metal bed radiated heat under the sun, and the view from the back was unobstructed, trees rushing past, dust clouds trailing behind, and the horizon stretching endlessly ahead. After Friday night football games, teens crammed into pickup boxes, singing along to the radio that blared from the cab. Voices competing with the roar of the engine and the rush of air. Rural parades and small-town Canada Day celebrations featured homemade floats built right into truck beds, kids perched on hay bales wearing hockey jerseys or waving tiny flags, parents driving slowly down Main Street while the whole town cheered. The sense of freedom was intoxicating, the thrill of speed without barriers, the camaraderie of shared adventure. Today's laws banning passengers in truck beds, along with fines and safety lectures, have turned this once common practice into a nostalgic memory of a time when risk was part of the ride. Cigarette smoke wasn't just tolerated indoors, it was unavoidable. Family gatherings meant clouds of smoke curling around lampshades, ashtrays overflowing on coffee tables, and the sweet, acrid scent of tobacco clinging to curtains and upholstery. Adults lit up at the dinner table, in the living room during TV time. And while chatting on the kitchen phone, oblivious to the children playing nearby, long car rides were hazy affairs. Windows cracked just enough to let in a sliver of fresh air while smoke swirled through the cabin. Kids fogged up the back windows on winter drives, drawing smiley faces and tic-tac-toe grids alongside the cigarette haze, their fingertips smudged with condensation and ash residue. Grandparents' houses carried the unmistakable signature of decades of smoking. Yellowed ceilings with nicotine stains, the persistent smell of stale tobacco embedded in furniture, and lighters tucked into every drawer and couch cushion. The idea that secondhand smoke could harm children wasn't widely understood or accepted. Smoking was simply a part of adult life, and kids adapted without complaint. Today's smoke-free homes, cars, and public spaces represent a massive cultural shift, driven by health research and a growing intolerance for exposing others to harmful fumes. Saturday mornings were a non-stop assault of commercials designed to hook young minds and empty parents' wallets. Between episodes of cartoons, ad breaks turned into mini shopping catalogs, showcasing sugary cereals with cartoon mascots, action figures with spring-loaded missiles, and dolls that came with entire plastic dream houses. Bright colors, catchy jingles, and exaggerated claims made every product seem essential. Kids memorized every word of cereal commercials, singing along to tunes about chocolate-flavored marshmallows or honey-coated puffs. Then nagging parents relentlessly during grocery store trips to buy the box with the best toy prize inside mail-in proofs of purchase became treasured missions. Kids carefully cut out UPC codes, stuffed them into envelopes, and waited weeks for cheap plastic toys or decoder rings to arrive. Cereal boxes doubled as entertainment, featuring mazes, comic strips, and collectible trading cards printed on the back. There were no restrictions on how aggressively companies could target children, no regulations limiting screen time or sugar content claims. The result was a generation raised on hyper-commercialized childhoods, where brand loyalty was built early and often, and where the line between entertainment and advertisement was virtually non-existent. Halloween in the 80s was a free-for-all of trust and sugar. Kids returned home with pillowcases bulging with treats, dumping their hauls onto living room floors to sort and trade without a second thought about safety. Parents might glance over the pile, but rigorous inspection for tampering was rare. Homemade goodies were everywhere. Neighbors handed out popcorn balls wrapped in wax paper, fudge squares on napkins, cookies in sandwich bags, and caramel apples on sticks. These were received with gratitude, not suspicion, and devoured immediately, or saved for later without worry. Teens gathered in friends' basements after trick-or-treating, swapping candy like currency. 3 mini chocolate bars for a roll of rockets, a bag of chips for a handful of gummies. They ate until their stomachs ached, racing to finish before curfew or before parents called them home. Urban legends about razor blades hidden in apples or poison candy did circulate, whispered during recess or shared around campfires, but they traveled slowly through word of mouth rather than spreading instantly online. The fear was abstract, distant, not enough to spoil the fun. Today's X-ray machines at hospitals, sealed-only policies, and parental panic reflect a cultural shift toward caution that has replaced the carefree candy gorging of the past. Real fur was the height of sophistication and luxury in the 80s, worn proudly without the ethical scrutiny it faces today. Women donned mink stoles draped over shoulders, fox fur collars framing their faces, and rabbit fur hats perched elegantly for Sunday church services or downtown shopping excursions. Fur coats signaled wealth, taste, and social standing, and owning one was a milestone many aspired to. Department stores displayed fur coats on mannequins under bright lights, the pelts soft and glossy, surrounded by the rich scent of cedarwood storage and leather sales staff, treated fur purchases like events, offering champagne and private fitting rooms. Teens admired their parents' fur-trimmed winter parkas and leather boots lined with shearling, dreaming of the day they could afford their own statement pieces. Fur accessories, muffs, earmuffs, and trim on gloves completed winter wardrobes. There was no widespread awareness of animal cruelty or environmental impact. Fur farming was simply an industry, and wearing fur was a fashion choice, not a moral dilemma. The rise of animal rights activism in the late 80s and 90s slowly shifted public opinion, turning fur from a status symbol into a controversial statement, leaving many vintage coats tucked away in attics, relics of a less conscious era. The concept of stranger danger was still in its infancy, and kids regularly accepted rides and treats from unfamiliar adults without hesitation. If a neighbor or friend's parent offered a lift home from school, kids climbed into the car without calling their own parents first. Trust was automatic, based on vague community ties or a friendly face. Teens hitchhiked or accepted rides to the mall from acquaintances' parents they'd only met once or twice, chatting casually during the drive without a second thought about safety. Local shopkeepers were fixtures in the community, handing out free gum, fudge, or lollipops to kids who wandered into their stores, creating a sense of warmth and belonging that would raise red flags today. The corner store owner knew kids by name, let them linger by the candy aisle, and sometimes slipped them an extra treat just for stopping by. Adults trusted other adults by default, and children were taught to be polite and grateful, not suspicious. The shift toward heightened awareness of predators, abduction fears, and constant parental supervision has fundamentally changed childhood, replacing easy trust with vigilance and transforming once common kindnesses into cautionary tales. And that's it for today's trip down memory lane. The 1980s were a wild time, freer, riskier, and undeniably different from the world we know now. If this brought back memories or made you shake your head in disbelief, give it a like and subscribe for more nostalgic journeys. Drop a comment and tell us which of these you remember most. Thanks for watching and see you next time.